In the middle of a crowded airport, a young German tourist suddenly runs for the exit. He runs through glass doors, past security, across a field, and then he's gone. That was 2014. Not a single person has seen him since the airport incident. 10 years later, this short piece of CCTV footage has become one of Europe's unsolved mysteries. What could drive someone to run like that and then vanish completely? Well, you're about to find out. It starts with one of the strangest airport security videos you'll ever see. A young man, dressed casually in shorts and a yellow t-shirt, stands in the Varna airport terminal on the Black Sea coast of Bulgaria. He looks restless, like he's waiting for something. His backpack and travel bag are with him. Then, without warning, he runs, sprinting through the terminal, out the doors, across the parking lot. He ditches his luggage, leaps a fence, runs into the field, and is never seen again. That man was 28-year-old German traveller Lars Mittank, and to this day, no one can explain why he ran or where he went. That clip has since been watched millions of times. It's super short, but it's also the last proof of Lars's existence. To some, his run looks like pure fear, as if he was being chased by someone only he could see, while some others believe it was just a man falling apart and turning paranoid. To understand why this footage shocks so many, you have to know who Lars was before that moment, because nothing in his life pointed toward a disappearance like this. Lars Mittank grew up in Itzehoe, Germany, a small town in Schleswig-Holstein. By all accounts, he was ordinary in the best possible sense of the word. His parents described him as kind, reliable, the type of son who stayed close to his family, even as he built his own adult life. He worked as a technician, played soccer, and was always up for spending time with friends. They called him cheerful, easygoing, and social. Someone who liked a beer, a laugh, and a football match. There was no history of mental illness or brushes with crime. Nothing to suggest that one day he would become the subject of international missing person posters. That summer of 2014, Lars joined a group of close friends on a trip to Bulgaria's Golden Sands resort. It's a busy tourist hotspot on the Black Sea, known for its beaches, cheap bars, and all-night parties. For young Europeans, it's a go-to place for a week of sun and chaos before heading back to work and routine. When Lars boarded the flight from Germany, there was no sign this would be anything other than a typical holiday, and truly the first days were exactly that. The group spent their afternoons on the beach swimming and relaxing. Evenings were packed with bars, clubs, and football on TV. They drank, laughed, and joined the crowds of young tourists doing the same. By the time the group reached the halfway point of their holiday, Lars was just another tourist enjoying Golden Sands. He was 28, fit, healthy, and surrounded by friends. And yet, only a few days later, everything would change. Golden Sands, like many resort towns, carried a rougher edge after dark. With so many tourists crammed into one strip of bars and nightclubs, fights weren't unusual. Add alcohol, rival football loyalties, and late-night bravado, and the atmosphere could shift quickly from fun to hostile. Lars and his friends, being German, naturally supported their home clubs. For Lars, that meant Werder Bremen, a team from northern Germany that he'd backed for years. On the night of July 6th, 2014, while out at a bar near the resort, that loyalty pulled him into an argument with a group of Bayern Munich fans. What began as casual banter about football escalated into something more. Words became heated, pride got involved, and before long, the dispute turned into a physical confrontation. The details of the fight remain fuzzy. Some reports say Lars was attacked outside the bar. Others suggest it began inside and spilled onto the street. What's certain is that Lars took a blow to the side of his head. It left him shaken and in pain. By the next morning, he knew something wasn't right. His left ear hurt badly, and sounds felt muffled. He went to a doctor in Varna to get checked out. The medical exam confirmed a ruptured eardrum, a painful but not uncommon injury in fights or accidents. It wasn't life-threatening, but it came with a major complication. Flying was now dangerous. Changes in air pressure could worsen the damage, possibly leading to permanent hearing loss. The doctor prescribed him a strong antibiotic to protect against infection, and instructed him not to board a plane until the ear had healed. You see, for Lars, this changed everything. His friends were scheduled to fly home to Germany the following day. Their holiday was ending, work and responsibilities waited for them back home, and the tickets were already booked. Lars now faced a choice. Ignore medical advice and risk flying with a ruptured eardrum, or stay behind alone in Bulgaria to recover. He chose the safer option, but it meant breaking away from the group. His friends boarded their flight as planned, expecting to reunite with him in a week or two once his ear healed. None of them imagined it would be the last time they would see him. The antibiotic prescribed to Lars has been a subject of intense speculation ever since. Reports suggest it may have been ciprofloxacin, a medication in the fluoroquinolone family. While effective, this class of drugs has been linked to rare but severe side effects, including anxiety, paranoia, and sudden changes in behaviour. Whether or not this played a role in what happened next is still debated, but at the time, neither Lars nor his doctor had reason to suspect it would become significant. What mattered in that moment was simple. Lars was grounded in Bulgaria. He checked into a cheap hotel near the airport in Varna, planning to rest and let the injury heal. It wasn't ideal, but it was manageable. Many travellers have found themselves delayed by illness or injury. It should have been nothing more than an inconvenience. That's really when things started to go downhill. Once Lars was by himself, stuff began happening that nobody could make sense of. The first sign came through his phone calls to his mother, Sandra. At first, she expected the usual updates, maybe complaints about being bored, or reassurances that his ear was healing. But what she heard caught her off guard. Lars sounded panicked. He said he didn't feel safe, that men were following him, that something was wrong. His words were all over the place, but the fear in his voice was clear. Sandra tried to calm him down. He was in a tourist city, surrounded by hotels and travellers. What could possibly be threatening him there? But Lars insisted. In one call, he described shady men he believed were after him. He never explained who they were or why they might target him. According to Lars, they existed, and he was being watched. Lars asked his mum to cancel his credit card and his mobile SIM card. To anyone else, this would be an inconvenience, cutting off the very tools he'd need while travelling. But Lars seemed convinced that by cutting those ties, he'd somehow protect himself. He didn't explain who he was hiding from or what risk the card posed, only that it needed to be done immediately. Sandra, worried by his tone, complied. Back at the hotel, staff began noticing unusual behaviour as well. Reports from those who interacted with him described a man on edge. He would pace the hallways, glance nervously at doors and windows, and speak in whispers. At times, he acted as though people nearby were listening in. This wasn't the behaviour of a relaxed tourist, killing time before a flight. It was the behaviour of someone who felt hunted. Sandra received more calls during this period, each one carrying the same feeling of dread. Lars's words varied, but the message was consistent. He wasn't safe. He needed help. Yet when she asked him to explain, his responses were vague. He didn't identify specific people. He didn't provide clear locations. It was more a constant sense of being pursued. One call in particular left her shaken. Lars's voice dropped almost to a whisper as he told her he needed to get out. She pressed for details, but he gave none. She later said she could hear fear in every syllable, as if he was speaking from a place of genuine terror. Still, without concrete information, she had no way to act beyond offering reassurance. People have all kinds of theories about what set this off. Some think the antibiotics he was on messed with his head. It can happen, even if it's rare. Others say that the fight he got into a few days earlier left him rattled, maybe even traumatized. And then there are those who believe it wasn't just in his head at all, that he actually ran into the wrong people in Golden Sands, and his fear was about something real. Sandra later admitted she didn't know how to make sense of what he was saying. As a mum, she wanted to believe he was just stressed, that once he calmed down, he'd realize nothing was wrong. But deep down, she knew what fear sounded like in her own son's voice. This wasn't made up. Something in him had changed. The calls, the pacing, the constant suspicion, they all pointed to a man who believed he had no safe place left. Each time he spoke with his mother, Sandra hoped he would regain composure. Instead, the calls only grew more fragmented, more desperate. She urged him to come home as soon as the doctors cleared him. He agreed, but his voice carried none of the certainty she wanted to hear. And things were only about to get worse. Lars wasn't done acting strange, not even close. It all led up to the moment caught on airport security cameras, a moment people still remember today. By July 8, 2014, just 2 days after the fight that left him with a ruptured eardrum, Lars Mittank's situation reached its breaking point. His paranoia had already been building inside that Varna hotel, but the next step in his journey, the doctor's appointment, would push the story into its most unforgettable chapter. That morning, Lars arranged to visit a doctor near Varna airport to check the status of his ear. His injury was the very reason he hadn't flown home with his friends, and he needed medical clearance before he could rejoin them in Germany. To anyone else, it was routine. One more appointment, one more checkup, then hopefully the green light to board a plane. But witnesses noticed almost immediately that something about him seemed off. In the waiting area, Lars didn't sit like everyone else. He was restless, shifting in his chair and glancing around non-stop. Some said he kept standing up like he couldn't stay still. Others remembered him pacing and mumbling under his breath. Every time he looked over his shoulder, it was as if he expected someone to walk in at any second. Then, all of a sudden, Lars bolted. He jumped up, pushed through the waiting area and ran straight out of the building. People were stunned. One moment, he was just another patient waiting for a checkup, and the next he was sprinting outside, like he was running from something nobody else could see. From there, the story shifted to the cameras. Varna Airport had surveillance everywhere, and they caught what became the most famous images of the case. The footage shows Lars running full speed through the terminal. He wasn't carrying a thing. He'd left behind everything: his bags, wallet, phone, and even his passport. For a traveller stuck abroad, those were essentials. But in that moment, Lars dropped it all and just ran. Have another look. First, he burst through the terminal doors, his yellow shirt and shorts instantly identifiable. He's moving with urgency, not just jogging but sprinting flat out, arms pumping as if every second matters. Behind him, no one is chasing. The security footage shows only Lars, but his body language makes it look like he's running for his life. Outside, the cameras track him across the airport grounds. He runs past startled travellers and staff, cutting across lanes meant for vehicles, then through the parking lot. Still at full speed, he heads toward the outer fence line. Without hesitation, he climbs it, hauls himself over, and drops down the other side. From there, he disappears from the fixed camera's field of view, vanishing into the open fields that stretch away from the airport. The next confirmed sighting comes from eyewitnesses who saw him running along a nearby road. He ran through grassy fields and into a wooded area not far from the airport perimeter. After that, all traces of him stop. No footage, no calls, and no sightings confirmed by authorities. The significance of this video can't be overstated. It is the last definitive evidence of Lars Mittank's existence. Every theory, every speculation about what happened to him begins and ends with that grainy clip of him tearing out of Varna Airport like a man in mortal danger. Investigators, journalists, and internet sleuths have played it back frame by frame, searching for clues. Some point to the sheer speed and determination in his run as proof that he genuinely believed someone was after him. His movements weren't casual or confused. They were urgent, driven, as though he was convinced his survival depended on getting away. Others, however, highlight the absence of a visible pursuer. In the footage, no one chases him. No one even appears to notice until he's already gone. That gap between his fear and the reality around him remains one of the most unsettling elements of the case. His abandoned belongings deepened the mystery. Inside his luggage were clothes, personal effects, and the items he would have needed to fly home. His passport and wallet were left behind too, making it nearly impossible for him to travel legally or buy essentials. Most haunting of all was his phone. In the modern world, leaving behind a mobile is almost unthinkable. For someone travelling alone, it was his only lifeline. Yet Lars left it sitting there in the terminal. In the days after, police searched the fields around the airport. They brought in dogs, flew helicopters overhead, and even called on volunteers, but nothing turned up. No footprints, no clothes, no body. It was as if Lars had simply vanished. For his mother, Sandra, that was the hardest part. The last time she ever saw her son was on that video. He was alive, running, and then gone, leaving behind a silence that has never lifted. That video has since spread everywhere. It has been shared on news sites and broken down on forums and YouTube. Many people call it one of the most haunting missing person clips ever recorded. It shows a young man in good health dropping everything, his bags, his passport, even his phone, and running as if his life depended on it, and then nothing. The first challenge was clear. No one knew why Lars ran, where he went, or what he was afraid of. That uncertainty shaped the hours, the days, and eventually the weeks that followed. The Bulgarian police were the first to act. Once the airport staff realised a passenger had left his belongings and sprinted into the open fields, they called the authorities. Security staff reviewed the CCTV footage, and it became obvious this was not a case of a delayed traveller. Something else was happening. Investigators tried to piece together Lars's final movements. They began at the airport clinic, where he had stopped briefly for his ear condition. They searched his abandoned luggage, which held clothes, personal items, and most importantly, his passport and wallet. Police pointed out that people who plan to disappear usually take money and identification with them. Lars had left both behind. His sudden run looked deliberate, as if triggered by fear. When word reached Germany that Lars had gone missing in Bulgaria, his family was thrown into panic. His mother, Sandra, who had been speaking with him often in the days before, flew to Bulgaria right away. She was not alone. Lars's father and other relatives joined the search. They retraced his steps at Golden Sands, went to the budget hotel where he had stayed, and spoke to staff who remembered his strange behaviour in the days leading up to his disappearance. As the family combed through Varna and the surrounding area, police widened their search. Teams were dispatched into the fields and wooded areas near the airport. These regions are a mix of open farmland, patches of forest, and small villages. Search parties looked for footprints, clothing scraps, or any trace that Lars had passed through. Sniffer dogs were brought in, but the trail quickly went cold. The lack of progress made the case particularly frustrating. Bulgaria in the summer is busy with tourists, especially along the Black Sea coast. If Lars had continued walking after leaving the airport, logic suggested that someone should have spotted him. Yet no reliable sightings were confirmed. Every reported lead turned into a dead end. Farmers working the land nearby hadn't noticed a young German man running through their fields. Drivers on the local roads didn't recall anyone matching his description. For a person in bright clothing to vanish so completely was baffling. Within just a few days, the story began to attract media attention. At first, local Bulgarian outlets reported on the case of a missing tourist, last seen running from the airport. But once German media picked up the story, it spread rapidly. Headlines framed Lars as the missing German tourist and emphasised the bizarre nature of the airport video. Television programmes aired the footage repeatedly, with commentators asking the same question viewers were already asking themselves. What could have made him so terrified that he ran away from safety instead of toward it? For Sandra, the media attention was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it brought international awareness to her son's disappearance, which meant more pressure on authorities to keep the case active. On the other hand, it also meant that speculation started almost immediately. Some German newspapers suggested Lars might have been targeted by criminals. Others hinted at drug use or mental health issues. Each theory added to the confusion, but none explained why no physical evidence of him could be found. Meanwhile, organised search parties continued. Helicopters were used to scan larger areas from the sky. Despite the intensity, the searches produced nothing. No clothing, no belongings, not even a footprint that could be connected to Lars. The family's efforts didn't stop there. Sandra gave interviews, pleading for information. Posters with Lars's photo were distributed around Varna and other Bulgarian towns. They included details about his height, age, and the clothing he had been wearing at the time. Travellers passing through Bulgaria were asked to keep an eye out in case Lars had tried to leave the region on foot or hitchhike toward another city. Tips did come in, but none were ever verified. By the end of the first 2 weeks, momentum was already starting to slow. Police resources in Bulgaria were limited, and without new leads, they began scaling back their efforts. For Sandra, this was devastating. She pushed authorities to keep the investigation active, but with no body, no witnesses, and no confirmed direction of travel, the case had hit a wall. German authorities also became involved, coordinating with their Bulgarian counterparts. They gathered Lars' phone records and bank details, trying to trace any activity. But after his mother had cancelled his credit card and SIM card at his request, there was nothing to track. He had no access to money, no working phone, and no identification documents. Survival under those conditions would have been extremely difficult, which only deepened the family's fear. The weeks turned into months and the family was left clinging to unanswered questions. Without additional evidence, the Bulgarian police couldn't say whether he'd been the victim of foul play, a medical emergency, or a mental health crisis. As time passed with no answers, attention shifted to the one piece of evidence everyone could see: medical explanations. When people first saw the airport video of Lars sprinting out of the building, the most natural question was, why? One of the earliest explanations put forward didn't involve criminals, secret pursuers, or anything sinister at all. Instead, it focused on his health, specifically his ear injury, and the medication he'd been prescribed in Bulgaria. Doctors who later looked into the case pointed out that Lars had suffered a ruptured eardrum during the bar fight days earlier. A ruptured eardrum can cause balance problems, dizziness, sensitivity to sound, and disorientation. For a tourist already under stress, that kind of injury might have set the stage for unusual behaviour. If the inner ear is affected, it can even alter how a person perceives their surroundings. Some argue that Lars's paranoia may have stemmed from those physical sensations, his body essentially tricking his brain into thinking something was wrong or unsafe. Then there's the issue of antibiotics. Lars was reportedly prescribed a common type used for ear infections and other bacterial problems, fluoroquinolones such as ciprofloxacin. These drugs are considered effective, but they also come with rare but documented psychological side effects. In some patients, ciprofloxacin has been linked to sudden mood swings, insomnia, hallucinations, or feelings of paranoia. In fact, health agencies in Europe and North America have issued warnings about these drugs in recent years, highlighting risks of confusion and even psychosis in certain cases. Lars may have been one of the unlucky few to experience those side effects. The timing lines up. He started taking the antibiotic after his fight, and soon after, he began making strange phone calls to his mother, speaking of shady men and threats that no one else could see. Adding to that, Lars was on vacation at a place known for its beach parties. Alcohol consumption was likely, especially earlier in the trip. Mixing antibiotics with alcohol isn't recommended, as it can intensify side effects. Even a few drinks while on ciprofloxacin might have made him more vulnerable to confusion or agitation. Combine that with the strong summer sun, potential dehydration, and the stress of being stuck alone in a foreign country, and you get a dangerous cocktail for mental instability. Medical experts also bring up acute psychosis, a temporary mental break that can strike people under high pressure or when their bodies are overwhelmed. Symptoms include paranoia, disorganized thinking, and the urge to flee from imagined threats. The way Lars acted in his hotel matched some of those classic signs. He seemed convinced he was being tracked, even though no evidence supported it. To his frightened mind, the safest option may have been to cut ties with his identity and resources. But here's the problem. Antibiotics and an ear injury might make someone act strangely. But would that really push a person to run out of an airport, cross parking lots, climb fences, and vanish into the fields? Paranoia could explain why he felt unsafe, but why choose the most dangerous option, running into an unfamiliar place with no money, no ID, and no supplies? And if his fear was just a hallucination, why didn't it fade after a few minutes? Instead, he disappeared completely. No trace at all. There's also the question of time. Side effects from ciprofloxacin or even a psychotic episode can be severe, but they are usually short-lived, and that led people to consider another possibility entirely. Crime and foul play. When Lars Mittank vanished in Varna, Bulgaria, one of the first theories people considered wasn't medical at all. It was a crime. Bulgaria's Black Sea resorts, including Golden Sands, where Lars had been staying, have a reputation that goes beyond beaches and cheap vacations. For years, they've been known as hotspots for organised crime, petty theft, and shady underground dealings. While most tourists never run into serious trouble, stories circulate about scams, drug networks, and violent groups operating behind the glossy tourism ads. Against that backdrop, some believe Lars may have stumbled into something dangerous. The fight at the bar just days before his disappearance gives this theory a foothold. While the official story is that the brawl was over a soccer rivalry, some speculate that the conflict may have been more complicated. In certain bars along the coast, organised gangs are known to hang out. If Lars crossed the wrong people that night, intentionally or not, it's possible he became a target afterward. The men he mentioned in his phone calls to his mother, the ones he said were following him, could fit into this narrative. Another possibility raised is mugging or extortion. Tourists in resort towns are often marked as easy targets for money, especially when they are alone. Lars had been separated from his friends because of his ear injury, and that made him vulnerable. If criminals noticed him walking around alone, carrying cash or valuables, they might have pressured or threatened him. His decision to ask his mother to cancel his credit card and SIM card suddenly makes sense. A darker version suggests that Lars might have been exposed to drug-related crime. Golden Sands has a thriving underground market for narcotics. Police reports from the region mention clashes between rival dealers, and tourists sometimes find themselves dragged in unintentionally. If Lars was offered something, or witnessed a shady deal, he might have seen or heard something he shouldn't have. For organised groups, silencing a witness is standard practice. The wrong place, wrong time idea also ties into his last hours. At the airport clinic, witnesses described him as nervous and restless. If he truly believed dangerous men were nearby, then his sudden sprint out of the terminal could have been a last-ditch attempt to escape. But this theory has problems. Once Lars ran from the airport, no clear evidence supports foul play. Search teams found no signs of a struggle in the fields around Varna. No witnesses came forward to say they saw him being chased, attacked, or abducted. For an organised crime group to silence him, they would have had to do so without leaving behind a shred of evidence. Given the number of police and volunteers searching the area in the days afterward, some argue that kind of clean operation seems unlikely. There's also the issue of his belongings. Criminals who target tourists usually go for money, valuables, and identification. Yet Lars's bag, passport, and wallet were left behind in the airport. Still, organised crime doesn't always operate on tourist-level logic. If Lars stumbled into something larger, like witnessing a meeting, a fight, or even a handoff between dealers, then money might not have been the goal. Silencing him or scaring him enough to run could have been the only aim. The fact that he was never found strengthens this possibility. There's also another thread worth mentioning: trafficking. Though less widely believed, some have speculated whether Lars could have been taken after fleeing the airport, caught by people who saw a disoriented man running alone with no ID. Human trafficking networks operate across Eastern Europe, and vulnerable individuals sometimes disappear without a trace. However, this idea lacks direct support in his case. No leads, no sightings, and no evidence of him being moved across borders have ever surfaced. What keeps the crime theory alive, though, is Lars's own words. In those final phone calls, he was insistent that he was being followed. He told his mother he didn't feel safe, that people wanted to kill him. That doesn't sound like someone fabricating fear out of nothing. Even if he was mistaken, his convictions suggest he believed there was a real threat. That details the strongest piece of circumstantial evidence supporting foul play. Yet investigators in Bulgaria never found supporting evidence. Police reports state there were no known suspects linked to Lars's disappearance. No criminal groups were connected to the case, and no physical signs of violence appeared in the areas searched. That leaves us in a frustrating grey zone. On one hand, the resort's reputation, Lars's visible fear, and his own words make foul play feel plausible. On the other hand, the total absence of evidence after he fled the airport weakens the case significantly. Among all the possible explanations for Lars Mittank's disappearance, one of the most commonly discussed is mental health. Unlike theories about crime or medication side effects, this one looks inward. Psychosis is the term that comes up most often in this context. Psychosis doesn't mean someone is crazy in the stereotypical sense. It refers to a condition where a person loses touch with reality, experiencing things that aren't there, or interpreting real events in distorted ways. Hallucinations, delusions, and intense paranoia are typical signs. Importantly, psychosis can appear suddenly, even in people with no prior history of mental illness. That's what makes it a candidate for explaining Lars's behaviour. Looking at the timeline, the escalation is clear. During the first days of his trip with friends, everything seemed normal. But once he was injured and separated from the group, a shift began. In the space of just a few days, Lars went from an ordinary tourist to a man convinced he was being followed. Stress is often a trigger for these episodes, especially when multiple pressures stack up. Add the lingering adrenaline from the bar fight and the isolation that followed, and the conditions for a psychological snap were there. Family history is another important factor. In cases of schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, relatives often point to earlier warning signs. But in Lars's case, his family reported no history of mental illness. That absence of background makes the idea of a long-term disorder less likely, but it doesn't rule out an acute episode. Psychosis can happen once and never again. It can also occur without genetic links. Lars's behaviour in his final days is textbook. The phone calls home were filled with fear that didn't match his surroundings. He spoke about men trying to kill him, yet no one else saw them. His pacing, whispering, and avoiding people in the hotel sound like the actions of someone retreating into paranoia. By the time he reached the airport clinic, he was restless and agitated, classic symptoms of a mind under siege. His sudden sprint out of the terminal may have been the final stage, a flight response triggered by overwhelming delusion. The disappearance itself can also be viewed through this lens. People in psychotic states sometimes wander aimlessly, retreat into isolated areas, or avoid contact with anyone. Search and rescue experts note that missing persons with mental health conditions often travel unpredictably and hide in places that make them hard to find. If Lars ran into the woods or fields beyond Varna, driven by a belief he was in danger, he might have hidden himself so effectively that even large search parties couldn't locate him. There's a problem with this theory as well. A breakdown could explain his fear and erratic behaviour, but it doesn't explain why he vanished completely. Most psychotic episodes end with the person being found by police, by passers-by, or by their own family. Even if Lars had collapsed or tried to hide outdoors, the searches should have uncovered something. Yet they did not. That said, cases of what some call disappearing psychosis are documented. Psychiatrists point to people who, in the grip of delusions, isolate themselves so fully that they manage to avoid detection for weeks, months, or even forever. In wilderness areas, survival without supplies is nearly impossible. If Lars wandered into the woods outside Varna, it is possible he did not survive long. Nature has its ways of erasing evidence: decomposition, animal activity, and weather. In that sense, the absence of a body doesn't completely rule out the breakdown theory. Some psychologists also suggest that paranoia specifically can lead to highly self-destructive decisions. A person who believes they're being hunted may reject help, avoid shelters, and actively run away from the very people trying to assist them. In Lars's case, if he believed airport staff or doctors were part of the threat, running into the countryside might have felt like the only escape. From the outside, it looks irrational. From his perspective, it may have been the only option. It is also telling that he asked his mother to cut off his SIM card and bank card. Within a paranoid framework, that detail makes sense. People in delusional states often believe they are being tracked through their phones or their finances. By cancelling those connections, Lars may have been trying to outsmart forces he imagined were closing in on him. Seen this way, his paranoia, whether driven by stress, isolation, or a full psychotic break, offers a framework that explains much of what he did. What it does not explain is what came after. When a person disappears without a trace, the hardest part for their loved ones is the silence that follows. For Lars Mittank's family, that silence has been broken again and again over the years by possible sightings, rumours, and hopeful tips, each one raising expectations, only to collapse back into disappointment. In the weeks after Lars ran from Varna airport, police in Bulgaria and Germany began receiving scattered reports. Some travellers swore they had seen a young man who looked like him wandering near Varna. A few locals claimed a stranger had been spotted in the countryside, close to where Lars was last seen on the airport cameras. None of those reports led to anything concrete, The trail grew colder almost immediately, but it was never fully abandoned. Months later, another sighting caused a stir. A homeless man in Varna vaguely resembled Lars. Photos circulated online and in the press, fueling speculation that he had simply dropped out of his old life and was surviving on the margins. Investigators checked thoroughly. The man wasn't Lars, just another person struggling to get by, pulled unwillingly into the public spotlight because of a resemblance. The pattern repeated over and over. A hiker in Romania thought he saw Lars on a trail. Someone in Poland swore that a man begging in a train station matched his face. Each tip went through the same process. Police inquiries, sometimes even face-to-face checks, and every time it ended the same way. No match. German police continued to log reports long after the Bulgarian investigation had gone quiet. Interpol notices and missing person bulletins were still active, so whenever someone spotted a blonde-haired man in his late 20s acting strangely or living rough, Lars' name came up. But none of these leads produced solid evidence. Not a fingerprint, not a confirmed identification, not a passport use. The spread of Lars' case onto the internet added another layer. His final airport footage went viral. True crime communities and online sleuths began dissecting every second of the video. Some thought they saw men in the background, fueling theories of pursuit. Others studied his body language frame by frame, debating whether he looked terrified, delirious, or simply confused. These discussions kept his name alive, but they never delivered answers. In the years that followed, Lars' mother became the central figure keeping the search alive. She gave interviews, appeared on German talk shows, and spoke directly to the public whenever a new lead surfaced. She appealed to anyone who might have seen her son. Sometimes tips came from people outside Europe, a supposed sighting in Canada, another in South America. The family chased them down with the help of police or private contacts. Again, all of them fizzled out. One rumour even claimed Lars had been living under a new identity, working odd jobs to avoid being found. It spread quickly online but collapsed when no supporting evidence appeared. No bank account activity, no official documents, nothing tying Lars to any life after July 2014. For Lars' family, each false lead was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it proved people were still paying attention, still looking. On the other hand, every dead end brought another wave of heartbreak. Hope would spike, only to be crushed again when the truth came out. Even years later, reported sightings continued to surface. Some were in Bulgaria, others in Germany, and some in far-off places. Each time the pattern was the same: a tip, an investigation, and then disappointment. No DNA match, no fingerprints, no solid proof. At the end of it all, here's what we really know. After July 2014, Lars Mittank never used his passport, his bank cards, or any official documents again. That's why every theory, no matter how detailed, falls short. Some point to paranoia and a mental health crisis. Others lean toward crime or something darker. But none of them can fully explain how a healthy young man ran out of an airport in broad daylight and was never seen again.